Welcome everyone. My name is Nikos, aka Sephir, and this is Out of the Box, EDH. In tonight's game, we have Regret at the top left, playing his Eluge deck. This is a control deck that focuses in abusing the mana reduction Eluge creates on each turn. At the top right, we have Mihawk and his Isshin deck. This is a deck that focuses on creatures with attack triggers that gets doubled due to its commander. At the bottom right, I am playing my Zedruu list. This is a list where every card is a part of a 4-card junky combo. Finally, at the bottom left, we have Shoki, running his 14th Doctor and Sarah Jane Smith pair. This is a Doctor's Tribal Reanimator pile, trying to capitalize in any synergies and spicy shenanigans between the Doctors. Without further ado, let's move to our game. Regret starts the game by playing a tapped Rivendell and passes. Mihawk plays a tapped Elegant Parlor. He surveils and chooses to keep his top. He passes to me. I play a tapped Raw-Green Triome and pass. Shoki plays a tapped Irrigated Farmland and passes. Regret plays an island and casts a Sapphire Medallion. He passes after that. Mihawk plays Clifftop Retreat and casts a Sol Ring that he surveilled earlier, followed by a Talisman of Conviction. He passes to me. I play a Minamo School at Water's Edge, a Talisman of Creativity, and pass the turn to Shoki. Shoki plays a Trendjalon Clock Tower, casts an Esper Sentinel, and passes. Regret plays an island and he has enough mana to cast his commander, Eluge, the Sortless Sea. Eluge puts a flood counter on Rivendell. He then passes. Mihawk plays a mountain for turn. He casts Hammers of Moradin, and then, being stuck without any black mana sources, he passes the turn to me. I play a Mystic Gate as my land for turn. I then cast a Liquamental Torque. I don't pay the 1 for the Sentinel, and Shoki draws a card. I follow with a Neoreth of the Healing House, and pass the turn afterwards. Shoki plays a Forest, and taps out to cast his commander, the 14th Doctor. He reveals the top 14 cards of his library, and puts in his graveyard the 1st, 8th, and 10th Doctor. He chooses his commander to enter as a copy of the 10th Doctor, and this is a huge flavor win. He moves to combat, and attacks Regret for 3 commander damage. His 10th Doctor ability triggers, and exiles an Alistair, the Brigadier, from his top, giving it suspend and 3 time counters. Regret takes the 3 damage. Shoki passes the turn after that. Regret plays an island and casts a Talrand, Sky Summoner. He then goes to combat and attacks Shoki with Eluge. Eluge's ability triggers and puts a flood counter in one of Regret's islands. Shoki takes the 4 commander damage and Regret passes. Mihawk, continued to be plagued by the lack of black mana sources, plays a mountain as his land for turn. He then casts an Etali, Primal Storm. He moves to combat, attacking me with the hammers. Myriad triggers and another 2 copies of hammers are created, attacking Regret and Shoki. We all take 3 damage. Mihawk passes the turn after that. I play a Sea of Clouds, followed by a Saheeli, Sublime Artificer. I do not pay the Esper Sentinel tax and Shoki draws a card. I then cast a Pendant of Prosperity that I gift to Regret. Saheeli creates a servo token and I pass the turn. Shoki removes a time counter from Alistair and plays a Mars Flash that he immediately sacrifices to bring us Para's headquarters. He plays an Ash Foretold and moves to combat, attacking me with his commander. His commander triggers and exiles an Ascent from Avernus from his top, giving it suspend and 3 time counters. I block the Doctor with Eoreth, and nothing dies. He passes the turn afterwards. Regret plays an island as his land for turn and uses my Pendant of Prosperity. He draws a card, while I also draw a card and put a Rugged Prairie in play. He moves to combat, attacking Shoki with his commander. Eluge triggers and puts a flood counter in another island of his. Shoki blocks Eluge with Esper Sentinel. Esper Sentinel dies, and then Regret casts a Pull from Tomorrow, where X equals 5, due to the reductions from Eluge and the Medallion. He draws 5 cards and discards 1, while he also creates a Drake from Talrand. He passes to Mihawk. Mihawk plays another mountain as his land for turn. He casts a Lightning Greaves and follows that with an Eldrazi Ravager. He puts the Greaves on the Ravager and moves to combat. he attacks Shoki with Etali and me with the Ravager and the Hammers. Both the Hammers, Etali and Ravager Annihilation triggers are on the stack. Hammers will create a copy that attacks both Regret and Shoki, and they also choose to tap Regret's Bird and my Eoreth. While the Etali and Ravager's Annihilation triggers are still on the stack, I choose to use Eoreth and untap one of my lands. I cast a Dawn's Truce, giving all my creatures hexproof and indestructible, while I also create a servo with Saheeli. I give the extra card draw to Shoki. Then the Etali trigger happens. Mihawk reveals a Terminate, Regret reveals Oger Pakpatik, I reveal a Mountain, and Shoki reveals the 11th Hour. Mihawk just uses his Terminate to kill Eluge. Finally, the Annihilator trigger happens and I sacrifice one of my servos. Both Regret and Shoki take their hits, while I choose to block the Ravager with my servo and just take the Hammer's damage. After all that, and while still missing black mana, Mihawk passes to me. I play a Thespian Stage as my land for turn, and I immediately tap out for a Sphinx of the Second Sun. I move to combat and attack Mihawk for 2 damage. I then move to my second main. My Sphinx triggers and gives me a second untap, upkeep and draw step. After I untap everything and draw my extra card, I pass the turn to Shoki. Shoki puts a counter on his Ash for Told and removes a counter of his suspended cards. He plays a tapped Scattered Groves and plays the second Doctor. He moves to combat and attacks Mihawk with his commander, exiling a monster manual from his top, giving it suspend and 3-time counters. At the end of his turn, the second Doctor triggers, and we all agree to draw a card and not attack Shoki. Regret plays a Halimar Depths as his land for turn, rearranging his top 3 cards. Once more, he casts his commander, Eluge, giving another flood counter in one of his islands. Due to Eluge's reduction, he casts for free a rapid hybridization on Etali. Etali dies, Mihawk gets a 3/3 lizard, and Regret gets another bird. He passes. Mihawk plays a tapped Abraded Bluffs and deals 1 damage to me. He casts Arabella, Abandoned Doll. He moves to combat and attacks me with the Ravager and Regret with the Hammers. Hammers trigger and choose to tap Eluge and my Sphinx, while 2 attacking copies are also created. With the Annihilator trigger still on the stack, Regret casts a Snap, targeting the Hammers. Before Snap resolves, I cast a 3 steps ahead to create a copy of my Sphinx, draw 2 cards, discard a card, and create a servo from Saheeli. Then Snap resolves, the original Hammers gets bounced, and the Regret untaps 2 lands while also creating a bird. I sacrifice 1 servo to the Annihilation trigger. Shoki can't block and takes the damage from the Hammer's copy, while I block just the Hammer's copy with my Sphinx and take the Ravager damage. At his second main, Mihawk just replays the Hammers. He passes the turn to me. I play my commander, Zedruu the Great-Hearted. I cast Heathline Rope. I tap the rope to search for a land, and while this is still on the stack, I untap it with Eoreth and reuse it to search for another one, while the rope is given to Mihawk, finally giving him a way to bring a swamp in play on his turn. I play a Gaia-Rich Sanitarium as my land for turn. I then immediately move to my second main, where both my Sphinxes trigger for 2 extra beginnings. I untap all my stuff, gain 4 life and drawing 4 cards in total from Zedruu, while I also draw another 2 cards for my 2 extra draw steps. With no maximum hand size due to the second Doctor, I pass the turn. At the beginning of Shoki's turn, he removes a time counter from all his suspended cards and adds a counter to Ash for Told, while Alistair gets casted from suspend. Shoki uses Ash for Told to cast his other commander, Sarah Jane Smith. He plays a Breeding Pool and taps out for a Gallifrey Stance, creating a clue from Sarah Jane Smith and a soldier from Alistair. After some thought, Regret decides to counter it with a Mystic Confluence, thanks to Eluge's reduction, while he also draws 2 cards. Shoki moves to combat and attacks Regret with his commander, exiling an Enlightened Tutor from his top, giving it suspend and 3-time counters. Regret just blocks with a bird. At Shoki's end step, the second Doctor triggers, and once more, we all agree to draw a card and not attack Shoki. On his turn, Regret immediately taps out for a Scourge of Leech to bounce our entire board, but I was ready with a Stifle to counter the Scourge's ATB. He moves to combat and attacks Mihawk with Eluge, putting a flood counter in Halimar Depths, and Mihawk blocks with his lizard token. Regret passes after that. Mihawk immediately casts a Wayfarer's Bauble and sacrifices it to search for a swamp. He also uses my rope to find a second swamp and passes the rope to Regret. He moves to combat just with the hammers, but Regret casts Aetherize and bounces the hammers back to Mihawk's hand. Mihawk moves to his second main, just replaces them and passes. At the end of his turn, I activate my Gaia Ridge Sanitarium, making everyone draw a card and discard a card. On my upkeep, Zedruu triggers. I draw 2 cards and gain 2 life. I play an Exotic Orchard as land for turn. I cast an Azor's Gateway. I immediately use it, drawing a card and exiling Retraction Helix. I use Eoreth to untap it and use it again, drawing a card and exiling an Ichthos. I use Minamo to untap it and use it once more, drawing a card and exiling a Feldon of the Third Path. I cast an Arcane Signet and a Lion's Eye Diamond, creating a total of 3 servos with Saheeli this turn. I move to combat and attack Mihawk with one of my Sphinxes, dealing 6 damage to him. Then I move to my second main, where both my Sphinxes trigger for 2 extra beginnings. In the first one, I untap all my stuff, gain 2 life and draw 2 cards with Zedruu and a card for the draw step. I cast a Valley Flood Caller. I use Azur's Gateway to draw a card and exile a Gilded Drake. Then I use Eoreth to use the Gateway one final time to draw a card and exile a Sakashima the Impostor. Azur's Gateway untaps, gives me 5 life and transforms into Sanctum of the Sun. I cast a Parallax Wave, a Chandra Flame Shaper, creating another 2 servos, moving to my final beginning, draw another 3 cards in total and gaining another 2 life and finally passing the turn. At the end of my turn, Regret casts a Blue Sun Zenith for X equals 4, draws 4 cards and creates a bird. At the beginning of Shoki's turn, he removes a time counter from all his suspended cards and adds a counter to As Foretold, while Ascent from Avernus gets casted from Suspend for X equals 0, having no effect. He plays a mountain and casts Bigger on the Inside, enchanting a forest. He plays the 9th Doctor for free with As Foretold, creating a clue from Sarah Jane Smith and a soldier from Alistair. Using the Bigger on the Inside, he casts the 11th Doctor, creating a clue and a 1/1 human. He convokes into a Nature's Lore, and he searches for a forest. He attacks Regret with the 9th Doctor. His commander copy of the 10th Doctor triggers, exiling the 3rd Doctor from his top, giving him Suspend and 3-time counters. Regret blocks him with a bird. At the end of Shoki's turn, the 2nd Doctor triggers. We all choose to draw a card and not attack Shoki. After that, Regret casts an Evacuation, creating another bird. I respond to that by casting a Sink into Stupor to bounce the Evacuation back to Regret's hand. I follow that by casting a Temporal Cascade, choosing for all of us to shuffle our hands and graveyards into our libraries. I also create another 2 servo. Without any of us having any cards left to our hands anymore, Shoki passes. Regret casts Blur, targeting his Scourge of Fleets and creating a bird. I respond by removing a Fate counter from my Parallax Wave and targeting the Scourge of Fleets. Scourge of Fleets gets exiled and Blur gets fizzled. He uses Pendant of Prosperity, draws a card and puts the island he drew into play. I also draw a card. He passes the turn afterwards. Mihawk casts his commander, Isshin 2 Heavens as 1. He attacks with the Hammers and Ravager at Regret and Arabella at me. Arabella triggers twice, we all lose 2 life and Mihawk gains 2. Hammer triggers and he chooses to tap my Sphinxes, the 14th Doctor and Eluge, while 2 extra copies are attacking me and Shoki. Regret sacrifices 2 birds to the Annihilation double trigger and blocks the hammers with another one. I block the hammers with Zedruu and Eoreth, and Shoki blocks them with 2 soldier tokens. Mihawk passes the turn after that. On my upkeep, Zedruu and Parallax Wave trigger. I draw 2 cards and gain 2 life from Zedruu, while I remove a Fate counter from Parallax Wave. I plus 2 Chandra, revealing a Turnabout, a Talisman of Progress, and an Azorius Chancery. I immediately move to my second main, where both my Sphinxes trigger. I tap my Sanctum of the Sun for 40 white mana and cast an Eat That Betrays. I then cast a Barren Glory. I use Eoreth to untap my Sanctum and tap it again for 40 blue mana. I use Minamo to untap my Sanctum and tap it for 40 red mana. I cast Turnabout to untap all my lands and tap them again for a grand total of 196 blue, white and red mana, more than enough to donate every single permanent of mine to Mihawk and my Zedruu to Regret, keeping for myself only my Lion's Eye Diamond and my Barren Glory. I sacrifice my Lion's Eye Diamond to discard my hand, and I move to my extra beginnings. Regret uses my Heathline Rope in a last moment attempt to draw something relevant, but he doesn't. Thus, having no more cards in hand and no other cards into the battlefield apart from Barren Glory, at the beginning of my first Sphinx extra upkeep, I win the game. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next video.